This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 241, Virtual Camps. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Boy, as the world is dealing with this coronavirus, conferences around the globe have been canceled and rescheduled. Midcamp and Nerd Summit were both scheduled for last week, and they both took an alternative route. At the 11th hour, they decided to go virtual. So today we have the organizers with us from those events, and we're going to discuss their experience during their virtual camps. Before we get to that, John Picozzi, how are you this week?
I'm doing okay. It's like Brave New World trying to, work with kids at home and, do the distance learning thing. And, so it's interesting. It's an interesting space out there. And anybody that's, a working parent, I can understand where I'm coming from. A couple of things though that I'm finding pretty interesting. One is I did not know this, but Zoom has a phone feature. We actually just started using it. And it seems pretty cool for anybody that actually has to make or receive phone calls and doesn't want to have like a physical phone on their desk. So stay tuned for more updates on that as I use it more. The other thing is too, distance learning. Distance learning is pretty interesting. So it's really fun to see kids use Zoom because it's just like it's kind of crazy, and I think the teachers that are out there are doing a great job of learning this stuff quickly and then using it effectively. And then the last thing I will add is I did not realize how extreme Lego building can be until I had a conversation with Nick and Steve earlier this week. And Steve, is it all right if I tell this story? I should have asked before. So Steve and his family were building Legos, and there were 4 of them, and they legit assigned roles to people, and like everybody had a job, and they built this replica of the U.S. Capitol. And I was just like, wow, everybody had a job, and it was like you're the project manager, and you're the part manager, and like I was like, wow, that is super extreme. And then Nick was like, yeah, sometimes I do that. And I'm like, I don't know, I just build things.
Yeah, we built a 1,100 piece Lego in, I think it was a little under 2 hours, which was we weren't like racing or anything, but when you have 4 people and 4 adults, by the way, these weren't kids, these are 4 adults that were looking to keep busy on Saturday afternoon last week. So we broke out the Lego set, and the only way I could envision having 4 people feeling like they would be involved was to assign roles. So it was pretty fun.
And it's funny because if you'd added like a kid or 2 to that, it would have instantaneously taken you double or triple the time.
Sure, absolutely. Nick, what's going on with you?
Just getting used to, some of the changes. Obviously I'm working from home, which I've done for my career, so that's not a big change. But my wife and I like to go out quite a bit, and we're learning to just be home. One of the things that we like to do a lot with friends is play games, party games, strategy games, all sorts of games like that. And my sister and brother-in-law introduced us to a game called Jackbox.tv, which is quite a bit of fun. It's like a party game type game. Each person uses a browser, and you can join a room, and the game kind of prompts you with some sort of mini game, and you just kind of take part of that. So my brother-in-law was streaming online so that everybody could see kind of the main screen, and then everybody kind of had, me and my wife had it up on each of our phones, and we would, play the game. We played for, a couple hours. It's a lot of fun. And I think you can buy different packages. Each package has a different group of games. There's some word games, some drawing games. It's a lot of fun. It's a good time. I think it's on sale right now too. Although I'm not an affiliate, so this isn't an ad.
Just out of curiosity, is it by the same people that did You Don't Know Jack?
I have no idea.
I think it is, yeah.
Somebody said it is. Okay, cool.
It's called they're Jackbox Studios, formerly
Jellyvision.
Jellyvision. Yeah, they're a Chicago-based company. We're having a conversation about this the other day. Yeah.
Very cool.
We used it,
It's like
we
old
had
school.
a family event at my sister's house over Christmas. We call it a Crossmas. And everyone gathered there, and my sister purchased like maybe a $10 package for that. And there were like probably 15 of us with our cell phones out on her TV doing a trivia game. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a good time. How about you, Stephen?
So I also nerded out a little bit over the past weekend, checking out, since I'll switch to Linux. And if you haven't done that yet, you've made a mistake in your life. But I tried out a tiling window manager. Nick, I don't know if you've ever used that before, but it's basically a distribution. One part of a distribution is the window manager, and you can swap that out into a tiling window manager, which is basically you manage all of your windows in a tiling system, so nothing overlaps ever, and you basically run your screen by keyboard. So you move things in out and you move around, and you do very little work with your mouse, only when you're like in a browser scrolling up and down, and you probably go to your mouse. So I installed one called Awesome Window Manager. It was actually pretty awesome, but it's going to take a while to get used to. So if anyone's interested, you can install it, and like depending on your distribution, you can usually pick which either you want to boot into the tiling window manager, or you want to boot into your regular distribution interface. Like I run what do I run here? Whichever one I'm running here, whichever desktop I'm running here, I can either run that or run Awesome Window Manager, so you can try it out a little bit and swap back and forth. But it's pretty cool.
Do you have to reboot to switch back and forth, or can you just
log out?
Okay.
So
I'll have to check it out at some point. I've heard of them. I mean, I'm just so used to the typical floating window manager paradigm that I've just never checked it out.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be hard to get used to, but it seems like you'll be super productive once, because you can you map things to keys. So like if you want to start up Slack, you can map a key that's like Control Alt S, and it will open Slack. It will open it in the display you want it to open on and in the position you want it to be in. And then it will always be there unless you tell it not to be there. So
It's pretty cool.
yeah, it sounds interesting. So that's what I did. In addition to running a project with Lego. So let's move on to our topic of the day. I mentioned that we have the organizers for two camps. We have with us Avi Schwab, who's the mid-camp organizer since its start in 2014. He helped form the Drupal Event Organizers Workgroup in 2019 and serves on the board with that. He's really a Drupal jack of all trades. He's been working in the Drupal community, in higher ed, nonprofit, and agency settings since 2007. And he's starting a new Drupal adventure on Monday. Guess we can learn more about that if you're willing to share it. He lives in Chicago along with his wife, 4-year-old and a dog, or a 4-year-old dog?
No, a 4-year-old and a dog.
And a dog.
A 4-year-old child, a 13-year-old dog.
Okay, great. I can see that there was some editing done in the notes on that to make it clear.
Sorry.
We also have Rick Hood. He's with Nerd Summit. He's a Drupal developer with Common Media since 2011. He's the organizer of Nerd Summit, and he's a volunteer for our camp, Ned Camp, since 2016. He's a freelance graphic design and website developer from 2000 to 2010. He's the president and CEO of Hood Enterprises, which Can anyone guess what that is? It's boat building and service in Portsmouth, Rhode Island, Taiwan, and Singapore from 1990 to 1999. So that's an interesting conversation. You can talk with Rick about boating. We also have Kevin Thal. Kevin, you've been on the show before, I think, a couple of times.
I have, yes. I think twice.
He started the Drupal Recording Initiative. He's the lead of it. He's been with MidCamp in 2019 and 2020. He's the president of the Midwest Open Source Alliance. He's a Drupal front-end developer and a remote contractor since 2018, and has been doing Drupal since 2009. So
I will just clarify.
Here. Okay.
I was also a MidCamp organizer since the beginning. I've been the MidCamp lead for the last 2 years.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So that's slightly different. And
Kevin's been there since the beginning.
Glad for that to be over.
Right. And for anyone who is just first-time listener or a new listener, Nick, John, and I have been working in organizing NedCamp since its start in 2014. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
And Rick has been on that team for the last few years as well. So we have a lot of Drupal camp knowledge in this call right now. So you guys went virtual and we want to know how it went. So let's roll back a little bit. When you were put in this position, I mean, maybe 3 weeks ago now, and that could be, maybe it was sooner than that, to have to make a decision about your camp, what were the options that were on the table for you as to either go or no go with the camp? So why don't we start with you, Avi?
Sure. So we started having these conversations and we kind of knew we were going to have to do something. But when we finally kind of over the one weekend, 2 weeks ago, where we were actually having to figure it out, our options were basically, we were still at that point, maybe we could have some people together possibly, which very quickly turned out to not be a realistic option. We were considering postponing, trying to schedule it later. We were considering canceling it all together, and then what we ended up doing was the totally virtual option. And the whole postponing and canceling both seemed like kind of bad ideas. We wanted to make sure that we kept running, just to keep the brand alive and keep us going. And any postponing option, either virtual or in person, just seemed like it was so much more complicated than anything else. We'd have to find the venue, we'd have to rebook all the speakers. Postponing just seemed like it was way more work than trying to move forward.
Interesting. What was the first indication to you that something had to change? Did something come from the venue? Or was it just what was happening in the world and you were being proactive?
There were 2 days where we probably had half a dozen different people, sponsors, speakers, random folks, all being hey, question marks. A couple people asking to cancel their tickets. So it wasn't a huge rush, but there was definitely that first week in March, there were a lot of questions.
How long did it go from when you first started discussing it until you actually made the decision to go virtual? Was that a 2-day discussion, or did you guys have a discussion for a week or two? Well, not a week, a couple weeks, but how quickly did you guys make that decision?
Yeah, I'll give you ours, and then I can let Rick talk about that. I was mapping this out earlier today. So it was February 25th that we started having these conversations. So that was through 4 weeks before camp.
Yep.
And And then we put out that first blog post that we did on the 26th. One of our organizers, JD, wrote some really good words, and that got picked up by a lot of people. And it was, we kind of made a lot of those words about it. But then things were kind of quiet. And then the week after that, like Friday, I remember this because like Friday, there were a couple words in Slack, and then over the weekend, there was just a whole lot of really serious discussions. And I had to go on Slack, and it was like, I don't want to have this discussion from my phone over the weekend. We need to talk on Monday morning. And so it was like March 9th that we had that conversation and decided to pivot.
Rick, how different was it for you?
Yeah, so we've been talking about it at the end of February, but I think we really kicked into high gear on March 2nd. I think it was partly because I saw a tweet from Damian McKenna that said any decisions on with regards to COVID-19 yet, and I was just thinking, I guess we better get moving on this. So we started seriously discussing it around March 2nd. We sent out a survey to all the ticket holders on March 6th. Then on we looked at those results. And on March 10th, we announced on Twitter that we were going to go virtual. And then on March 12th, we sent out a MailChimp kind of giving the details of that.
What were the kind of overall results of that survey? I'd be curious to hear what your sponsors and attendees kind of thought.
So 47% said keep it as it is. Now, remember that things are changing rapidly. So like when we sent out the thing on March 6th, and also that was way up into the 50s when the survey started, and it was dropping rapidly as more came in. But anyways, at the end, 47% keep it as, do a physical one at the same time. Only 14% said go virtual, 34% said bump it to summer, and 5% said just cancel it and do it next year.
Oh, wow.
But so even though it wasn't a big percent that was virtual, we just kind of really wanted to blast ahead and do it on the same schedule. And also, part of being a nerd is experimenting. So we thought it would be a fun experiment.
Yep. One of the things I want to kind of say in the beginning is I really want to applaud you guys for making that decision. I know late February, early March, we had, I think, a few hundred cases in the country. And people were just starting to talk about it. And that decision is very difficult. Now we're having you on to discuss the virtualization aspect of it, but I definitely want to commend you guys and both of your teams for making that decision at a time when, now it's clear, 2020 is, hindsight's 2020. Now it's very clear you made the right decision. But 3 weeks ago, that must have been a very, very difficult decision. But that's part of putting on a camp. So I want to just make sure that, our listeners are aware that was a difficult decision at the time.
It also turned out that we wouldn't have been able to do it even if we wanted to, because UMass said you couldn't have any meetings bigger than 50 people sort of the week leading up to it. So
yeah. But all of those closures happened like 2-3 days before camps were supposed to start. So if we wouldn't have made a decision, we would have just been, both of us would have just been totally out.
Yep.
Just out of curiosity. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah. So I was in London at the time when we had this meeting because I was there so that I was going to record Drupal Camp London. And they were facing the same issue as we were, as everybody, government, venue, says that this is okay to proceed. What do we do? For MidCamp, we were fortunate that by the time we canceled, we were able to get our venue deposit back, and we had not committed to catering yet. So financially, it didn't kill us. Drupal Camp London had no choice. They weren't going to get any of their money back. They said if we canceled it, we would have gone bankrupt. So we should just have it anyway. And the scary thing is, so I flew back home Monday, the week of MidCamp. So just a little over a week ago yesterday. So by yesterday, during London camp, UK was like, oh, business as usual, it's fine. Within the span of a week, they were on total lockdown. So This thing moved fast.
Yeah. That's one of the things I think looking back, people realize, how quickly people could have reacted differently. I mean, yeah, like we were saying, when you guys were starting to make this decision, the U.S. had 300 cases, and today India went on a 21-day lockdown. 40% of the world's population currently is on lockdown. So this is, to say, 3 weeks ago there was almost nothing, and now 40% of the world's population is on lockdown is moving fast. I think that's a bit of an understatement.
So
I was talking to somebody this afternoon that referred to this as a slight glitch. It's like we're working at a new house. It was one of our contractors. Like, we've run into a slight glitch. It's like the global pandemic.
yeah.
That glitch.
Yeah.
So looking at how you plan an event, right? You have all the space, you have all of these meeting rooms, you have all of, you have a place for lunch and all this stuff. How do you turn that into a virtual camp? So I guess the real question is, like, how is the virtual camp structured? Did it change much from your planned vision of the camp or how you guys normally have the camp? And I'll direct that question to Kevin.
It's interesting. So we ended up canceling our summit and training day, which is typically mid-camp is 4 days. Summits and training.
And Kevin, why was that? Was that just because it was going to be too much to try to organize, or you just didn't have enough time?
Attendance was already low for training, so we thought to try and go through a whole 8-hour Zoom session for such a small current attendance number, we didn't think it was worth it. And then for the summit, it was strictly for sponsors, and we were going to fly in Jam from Cologne, Germany, to host an in-person session with sponsors that just would not work virtually. So
right.
We figured that day was a wash. But as far as camp days, we basically ran business as usual, where we turned physical rooms into Zoom rooms, which gave some the sense of place, I guess, to the sessions. And then we had a separate Zoom for hallway track discussions. And then as far as parties, we did virtual parties.
So did you set up a Zoom for the room, or was it a Zoom per session?
Zoom per room.
Okay, so people could
Avi
still
should talk
pop
about
in.
this.
Yeah. So we had 6 Zoom accounts, and we had those each set up with instead of the scheduled rooms, we just used the personal meeting room option. So there were basically Zoom rooms that were just permanently open for the whole time of the conference.
Okay.
You can give those a little nice permalink too. And so it was Zoom/my/midcamp 315. And
okay.
we, it was pretty easy. We just linked those on the site to the taxonomies and displayed the Zoom permalinks on the session pages. And that made it really easy. I mean, not really easy, but as easy as possible to make that transition from a live event to a virtual event.
And just out of curiosity,
recording with that, did you record push record at the beginning of the day and stop it at the end of the day?
I think Rick and I have two slightly diverging stories on that.
Okay.
Really based on Zoom's performance from Wednesday of last week to Thursday of last week. So we were planning on doing Zoom cloud recordings. I was testing that early in the week last week, and Zoom was having pretty degraded performance of cloud recording processing. And so I, at the very last minute, Wednesday night before sessions on Thursday, decided we were going to switch from cloud recordings to local, mostly because I knew Kevin would be heartbroken if we lost a bunch of recordings, and I just couldn't do that. So we went to all local recordings. And so we had the speaker, we had the speaker, and we had a host and a room monitor in the rooms. And so the goal was to get 2 out of those 3 people recording every session. And we managed to get every session recorded locally. And then we had folks zip that up and upload it to Slack, and then Kevin downloaded it and processed and put them up to YouTube.
So one additional question there, and then I'm going to ask Rick for his answer. So you said you put the Zoom links up on the session pages. Is your camp free, or how did you prevent people from jumping into the Zoom rooms?
Yeah, our camp is not normally free, but given that DePaul University, our venue, was so flexible with our contracts, we, as part of the discussion to go virtual, we were just like, we can do this free, and we have no idea what's going on in the next 2 weeks, so we're just going to open it to the world and deal with that later. So for us, we were able to just put everything out there, open all the rooms, and just make it totally free.
Cool. So Rick, switching to Nerd Summit now, how did you guys handle the virtual camp structure?
We did the exact same thing. We had a Zoom link for each room. We had 6 of them. We had 2 extra Zoom links. One we called Coffee and Networking, and one we called Hangout and Help. And also I should mention that Kelly Albrecht, who's the main organizer of Nerd and Nerd Summit, set up a shared Slack channel between us and MidCamp. So it was a lot of fun going in there and sharing our ideas and everything. That was actually one of the most fun parts of doing this whole thing.
Yeah, it was really great.
Yeah. So we did cloud recording and didn't have a problem, but we had seen the issues that Avi was talking about in the previous week, but we just lucked out, I guess. And yeah.
So what was the biggest kind of unforeseen challenge going from physical space to a virtual conference? And is it something that you were able to solve, or is it something that you just have in mind for future?
Who's that
Thinking.
for?
Rick.
I think the biggest challenge was what to do with the non-session time. To me, the sessions were fine. Like, they were just as if you were there. It's like the hallway, situation in a regular conference. How do you do that? So we had this coffee and networking room that Kelly ran that really worked great at lunch before the sessions, and at the end of the day it worked great then. But basically nobody went into it between sessions. So the between sessions thing we really never figured out, but the rest of it kind of worked pretty good.
Did you find that people were, because one of the things that we noticed at our camp, at NedCamp anyway, is, if we have 100 people there at any given point, 30 of them are not in any sessions. Did you find that you had a higher attendance percentage in sessions? Or actually, how did you handle it?
So that's the thing, right? Like, what is a person attending our camp that's not in a session?
Interesting.
I pulled some numbers on how many people joined our Slack. I have a number that's like between 2,000 and 3,000 like Zoom sessions, depending on where we counted from. So those are not unique individuals, but Zoom joins. So like every time any person joins a Zoom room, Zoom counts that as a session.
Okay.
So yeah, and the other number that we had was we kind of kept counts in the rooms, and so we have like a simultaneous attendee count.
Okay.
And so we maxed out at like 230 simultaneous folks, and that was in the first session on Thursday morning. That was the most like we had in any one session block. So that's and that would probably be up. In general, we sell around 220 tickets, which generally results in fewer people in rooms and sessions.
Yep.
But
so you're saying you had about the same number of people attend the?
I would say we had more, actually.
version?
I would say we had more.
Yep.
I looked at we record our room counts now. So the past 2 years, our highest number of, I'll call it butts in seats, because that's what it is, for a session block was 160. So our highest number this year was 234. So it's quite a jump. And we stayed 234 was our peak, but we stayed in the mid 100s to 200s throughout camp, which
that's really impressive.
Definitely overperformed last year. What was also interesting is, based on venue seat capacity, many of the small rooms like had triple the capacity that would be possible in a physical space.
Interesting.
That's fascinating.
Rick, what was your experience with attendance?
Yeah, ours was disappointing, I think, unless we're not measuring it correctly, but it seemed to be around 40% of what we had on day one last year. So we got in the 70s on day one this year, and we were in the 180s last year. And the way we were measuring this year is how many people came to the keynote. We didn't really keep track of, like, are people showing up for just these two sessions, but not these sessions? So it's possible the total people who came that day was more than 73 or whatever we measured, but we don't really know.
Is that information recorded? Can you go back and look at sometime in the future to kind of get those statistics? Or
so I think, Rick, your event was totally free and open too in the end, right? Or it wasn't free, but it was open, right?
It was, actually it was, the way we did it is it's free, but you can pay if you want to, and we have a suggested price, and about 40% of the people pay. And then one thing we did differently than you is we put passwords on the Zoom, on the Zoom rooms, not because of the payment thing. We didn't care about that, but we had heard horror stories of, trolls entering Zoom rooms and doing bad stuff. So we were a little bit worried about that.
Oh,
right.
Interesting.
So Zoom can collect registration information from people. But we didn't do that just because it was like another logistical hurdle that we didn't want to jump through. So if you don't ask people to register, all Zoom has data on is that, like, sessions that I was talking about. So we can see how many people joined all of our rooms over those days.
Okay.
But we have no concept of uniques. We have no,
Rick brought up a interesting concept. Did mid-camp, because it was a link on a website open to the public, see any trolling or any kind of unsavory behavior?
Yeah, we didn't. I was really worried about that. I was like, I had a Google Doc with all the Zoom links, and I was like holding on to it. I was like, this is not going up until 8 a.m. the morning of sessions.
It was probably smart.
But we had no problem whatsoever. We left the rooms open overnight, like between Thursday and Friday. And I mean, Zoom, like, I think part of that concern was was alleviated because Zoom doesn't keep any history of, the chat or anything like that. If you join a Zoom room and somebody's posted a link before that, it's just gone, right? So there's not really like back scroll that people could pollute. But yeah, we didn't have, I think we definitely had some some joins that were just people like who either left or were lurking or weren't really participating. There were a couple of rooms where you had to be like, this room is closing. You're not unmuting yourself. We're not really sure if you're a real person or not. We're going to kick you out now. But that was it.
Now, you both camps sold tickets before the event. How did you handle ticket sales, people who purchased a ticket for the on-site conference and now it went virtual? What did you guys do? Rick, I'll start with you.
We told them, when we announced it, we said, you're welcome to have a refund. We think it's going to be great, but you're welcome to get a refund if you want. I think we had 4 people who wanted a refund, so it was really low.
How about you, Avi?
Yeah, and so we had a number of different ticket levels. We also have an individual sponsor option. So And we do, sell tickets. We just decided, since everything was so up in the air, and again, we were very fortunate to have a really flexible venue, and weren't going to get kind of screwed over financially. We just said, give it all back. And so we just instantly refunded everything but the individual donations. And then I sent an email to the individual donors saying, if you want your money back, we'll give it to you too.
Did you do the same with sponsors, or how did you handle sponsors?
No, we didn't just give all the sponsor money back.
Okay.
No, we sent an email to the sponsors explaining the situation and saying, again, saying, we want you to be happy with this event. We value this relationship. We would love for you to stay, but if you want, we're happy to refund you if you want to back out. So we had two of our core sponsors back out completely. A couple others out of 7. So we had 2 back out completely. 1 or 2 others kind of readjust things. But we ended up with 4 core sponsors. And then the lower level folks, I either didn't respond at all or were just like, cool beans.
Did you feel, from an organizer perspective, I know for our camp, we're constantly focused on providing sponsors with value, as much value as we can in any way. Did you make any decisions on things you did in the virtual camp to try to promote or give the value that you try to do when you're on site? And how did you do that?
So one thing we did was for each of the Zoom rooms, we had the right amount to have the top sponsors have their names on each of the Zoom rooms. So that's one thing we do, because one thing they were giving up was they didn't have a table at the actual event, physical event. So we did that, and Kelly handled pretty much all of the communication with the sponsors, and they all seem to be pretty happy as far as I know.
You mean each sponsor didn't have a Zoom room that you could walk into and talk to them if you wanted to?
We actually, none of them seem to really want to do that except one. So one thing we offer them too is if you want to come on and give a pitch before each session in your room, you could do that, but only one of them decided to do that.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so we haven't done named rooms for a while, but it did end up that each one of our core sponsors was able to have a piece of the virtual camp that was named. So Clarity Partners and Pantheon sponsored our captioning service. Bounty has captured the recordings, or sponsored the recordings, and Palantir sponsored the virtual game night. So they were each able to kind of get their names on a piece of it.
And thumbs up to Avi for now sponsoring those guys into our podcast. That was well played, sir. They should give you extra money for that.
I was in charge of sponsorships this year too, so it's my job.
There you go, furthering your initiative. I love it. So planning an event is no small task, as everybody on this call knows, right? Taking that event that's been planned and now shifting it to a virtual format is probably an even bigger task, especially at the last minute. How much strain did the shift put on your organizing team? And I'll direct this to Rick first.
Yeah, I think the main stress was about the short amount of time we had to figure out exactly how we'd use Zoom, and also how we would communicate that to the speakers, attendees, and also our team who are going to be the Zoom room hosts. So that was the added stress, but that was offset by reduced stress because we didn't have to deal with any of the details of the physical conference, from name tags to food. So and I'm kind of the logistics guy of Nerd Summit, and Kelly kind of does everything else. And then we have a bunch of volunteers that also do stuff. But from my point of view, it was a lot less stressful because on the day of, there was a lot less to do really, except for, the Zoom room stuff.
You mean you guys didn't mail everybody a sandwich?
No.
Oh, hey, I got this slice of pizza in the mail. Avi, how did you guys feel that you managed your stress?
Yeah, it was a challenge. I mean, we definitely had some pretty stressful conversations kind of at the onset. And there was, yeah, it was, especially with the way everything in the world was, it was rough. But yeah.
You keep going. I was gonna ask another question, but I'll let you finish this one first.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, luckily we have a huge group of organizers this year. We have had 18 people who were officially on the organizing team and a number of volunteers who stepped up. And yeah, everybody was really amazing, kind of helping out, pivoting, and getting the work done.
Was anybody on the organizing team like opposed to the idea of going virtual, or reluctant, I guess, to the idea of going virtual? Just curious.
Sadly, yes.
And what I just to dive in there a little bit more, what were the concerns for that person?
I think overall the concerns were, we need to do this. We need to keep in touch with each other physically. That's why we do this event. And just disagreement that, because again, at the time, all systems were go. So as has happened many times in the past, like, well, that big, terrible thing that's going to happen didn't really happen. Media overblew it. So there were some of those feelings that in hindsight, we see how it shook out, but that was some of the opposition.
So
interesting.
I'm actually curious a little bit about, we've talked a little bit about the attendees, but what about the speakers? How were there any speakers that had to back out because for whatever reason? And kind of related, did you find it? I have clients that sometimes have difficulty joining Zoom, although Zoom is usually the easiest video sharing platform to join out of any that I've used. Did you have, experience with any people having trouble getting into the particular session that they wanted to? And I guess I'll ask Kevin first.
We reconfirmed all our speakers, and there was a small handful that said, for whatever reason, no, I don't want to do it virtually. Which was great, because we basically had a full schedule. And for all the people who did confirm, everybody presented. And I don't think anybody had any difficulties. There were a few minor hiccups with audio. But aside from that, I think, and the feedback from presenters was that it was smooth. And from the attendees, felt it was smooth. I know personally, from recording standpoint, there was none of the door slamming, bag opening, zipping, crunching, coughing, all those things that happen in the audio of a live. Like, the audio was pretty clean for all of these.
Hold on a second. There were no dogs barking, children screaming, coffee makers making.
All the attendees were muted until Q&A.
Oh, I was talking about from the speakers.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, but we also did do, Kevin was in London at the time, but we did a lot of work trying to prep the speakers too. We had three like speaker resource training sessions Monday, Tuesday before. So we just had to open Zoom.
Or is that new?
I don't think we've done that in the past. We've made attempts at doing kind of speaker resources, but it's always kind of a thing that most of our folks have done this before. And we're one of the initiatives that we're trying to do is really push to have more resources for new speakers, especially from underrepresented groups. And so, but especially because everything was up in the air. We had 3 sessions and had a decent number of people join. I would say probably more than half of our speakers joined those, just to kind of go through our instructions, make sure everybody was on the same page. People had questions about how they were presenting, how panels would work, stuff like that.
And how about Nerd Summit? How was your experience with the speakers and attendees getting on Zoom?
We didn't have any trouble with people getting on Zoom. We did also have the training sessions like MidCamp did. We didn't have too many people come to that, but a couple of speakers did, and that was helpful. Now we're not just like a software camp. We have some physical stuff like Arduino and whatever. So some of our sessions couldn't happen. Like there was one with Evo robots. There was one with the people were going to sew masks with LEDs in them or something. So those had to go away. And then
the mask sewing would have been useful.
Yeah.
With or without the LEDs.
Yeah. I don't think there were those kind of masks, but there was some kind of kid project because we try to get kids coming too. But anyways, so they went away. And then we did have some sort of last minute speaker cancellations. And I get the feeling that happened and the attendance was lower because people are just kind of generally freaked out about the COVID-19 stuff. And they were like, I don't know, spending more time with their family, and just the summit was not their top priority. So I think that was a factor.
Knowing what you know now, after the fact, did you guys make the right decision to go virtual? Rick?
100%.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Everyone's shaking their head yes. That's great.
All right. Well then, again, knowing what you know now, having the virtual conference in the rear view, if there is a next time, what would you do differently? Avi, I'll let you go first.
What do you mean by if there is a next time? Like if we're all here next year?
I mean, if by next year they haven't developed a vaccine and this thing's still an issue, you know what I mean.
No, I mean, so if we had to do a virtual conference again, I think we were pretty close. Like Rick said, the biggest thing that I feel we missed on was the extra session socializing and figuring out how to support that. I think is a bigger challenge. Yeah, and again, like I miss human beings. I would really love to be in a room with people, and I think assuming we're not all on lockdown next year, we've got a lot of this to take forward to like a hybrid event in the future.
Kevin, you have anything to add?
Just to kind of go back on that hybrid event, like I think regardless, even if this is not an issue next year, we'll probably do a hybrid just because so many people were excited because they've heard about MidCamp, they've never been able to attend, and now they could. And so seeing some people from Germany, London, different time zones joining some of these sessions and faces that I've seen, I never would have thought I'd seen it at MidCamp were there. So having seen how London pulled it off very last minute, because I was initially skeptical about a hybrid event, thinking logistics were more challenging. Seeing how they pulled it off gave me a lot of ideas on how it could work.
Okay, I got a follow-up question, but I'm going to check in with Rick first on if he would do anything differently the next time around.
Yeah, it would be to come up with more ideas on how to use the non-session time in Zoom rooms. So like birds of a feather in Zoom rooms or discussion topic rooms or whatever. But I do want to say that the coffee and networking Zoom room that Kelly was running was really cool. And that was probably the funnest part of the summit for me, where what he did was he'd throw out a question for discussion and then randomly throw people into breakout rooms, like 2 or 3 people in a breakout room, which Zoom can do. And we would discuss that. Yeah, we would discuss that. Then we'd all come back into the main room and talk about what we'd discuss. But what was cool about it is I was forced to meet people I wouldn't have met otherwise in the breakout room. So that was really cool. And then also the what would have been the party, which was that same room after the end of the day of Friday. A whole bunch of people showed up, like there were a whole bunch of people from Chattanooga Drupal group for some reason. And so I met them that I wouldn't have met otherwise. And it was just that's just kind of cool, I think.
So going back to Avi and Kevin for a second, you had talked about a hybrid event in years to come. Do you think hybrid events would detract from people actually coming to MidCamp?
I don't think so. I mean, so I've run our numbers the last couple of years, and we have like I think 40% of our camp is the Chicagoland area, or no, 60%. I don't know. A decent number of our attendees are from the kind of the Midwest, and I think there's still a lot of value in that, you know, and in having people from a short distance away attend. But I think there's a lot more value too in and again both opening up our pool for attendees and opening up our speaker pool, so we could have both virtual remote attendees and remote speakers if we did a hybrid event, which I think would be really cool.
And I do think even if it does drop our physical attendance slightly, our overall attendance would probably grow. So we'd be reaching more people. We'd be lowering barriers to entry. And then again, talking about London, where people were very, very conflicted on whether to attend, people who were there were really, really happy that they attended, because that's the whole point of these events.
There's still a motivation to come for the hot dogs and pizza, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've heard about a lot of the positives and a couple of the negatives, but if you had to take away one thing, the best thing about going virtual, and maybe aside from, the no physical interaction, hallways track, the kind of maybe most surprising negative about virtual, what would you say that is, going forward, Rick?
What would be the negative?
Yeah, aside from not being in person, what was kind of the most surprising negative about going virtual?
I'm not sure we really have data on this, but I kind of wonder if a virtual conference has kind of a lack of commitment to it. So like, if you're signed up for a physical conference and you're going to go to the sessions, or you're going to participate. And I think with a virtual conference, maybe it's a little bit too easy to say, I'm going to go outdoors today, I'm not going to go to the conference.
Makes sense. How about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I would kind of echo that, because we definitely heard from attendees who missed a session because their boss knew that they weren't physically at an event, so they got pulled in to a call or an issue. So I think the attendees lose that kind of sanctuary of, hey, I am not available here for these 2 days or this one day. I mean, we even ourselves, when we're, I think, working from home, lose that separation and that kind of mindset of I'm here in this space. I'm going to be physical and present here versus, oh, I'm at home. I'll just kind of treat it like any sort of media that I treat at home.
So as we wrap up here, one of the things I was curious about is you guys seem to have success at these camps. It seems to have been well received. The feedback that I've seen has been great. Do you think there's a place moving forward for a virtual annual camp that's like a national event, like a Drupal Con, that's a virtual environment that it removes the barrier of the travel and the cost and can hit on some of the benefits that you guys talked about today?
So there are some folks who are trying this out already. Front End United is a camp that's based in Europe, but they've been doing these Front End Reunited sessions and trying to get their sessions out across the world. I did one of those in Chicago last year, and it was pretty great. They've been doing a lot of work pushing this idea. So I think as far as a Drupal event, it'd be super. And I'd love for somebody to organize it.
Any other thoughts on that, Rick or Kevin?
I think the commitment thing might be a problem. Like I can imagine if DrupalCon or something like that was, virtual. Oh, sure, I'll go. And then when the day comes, will I really go? I don't know.
And my thoughts are, how do we I don't think we've yet figured out how to make it, how to figure out what sponsors we'll get out of a virtual event, because they're not getting the touch points that they would at a physical event. So we've started to brainstorm ideas, and I think we'll continue throughout the year. But like, how do we add value for sponsors?
Yeah.
I feel good, a little bit better about knowing that virtual events aren't going to be replacing our physical events. But that's just me personally.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've reached the end of our show. As always, if you have a question or feedback, reach out to us on Twitter at Talking Drupal or email us at show@talkingdrupal.com. You can also get show updates by signing up for our newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
I'd also like to take a moment to thank all of our patrons. Thank you for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choose Become a Patron. And patrons always get a sneak preview of the show with the raw before and after show as well.
So, Rick and Avi and Kevin, thank you for joining us today, and congratulations on being trailblazers in this virtual world that you went to. You guys did an amazing job. I saw sort of firsthand kind of effort Rick put into making this thing happen in a week and a half, and it was mind-boggling what went on in those 10 days leading up to the camp. So congratulations on doing a great job. If anyone wants to contact you guys to discuss this in more detail with you, or just reach out to you for any other reason, Rick, where could people track you down online?
Rick Could on Twitter is probably best.
How about you, Avi?
Sure. I'm AJ Schwab on Twitter and Froboy basically everywhere else.
And Kevin?
Kevin J. Thull on Twitter and K. Thull in the Drupal world.
Great. Thanks, guys. How about you, John?
Everybody can find me on the social media and Drupal.org at John Picozzi, and you can find out about Oomph and the trainings that we're doing at oomphink.com/trainings.
Great. Nick?
And you can find me pretty much everywhere at Nixman, NICXVAN.
And I'm Stephen Cross. That would be Stephen Cross on Twitter with a PH. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you.